They actually laughed. Not whispered, not smirked. They laughed out loud when the Omega stepped forward to enter the Alpha's trial. "An Omega?" one of the nobles scoffed. "She won't survive the first test." Even the warriors were shaking their heads because the Alpha's trial had already broken 5 high-born Lunas, and this was a kitchen worker. They said no Luna could survive the Alpha's trial. They said the last one nearly died trying. So when the rejected Omega stepped forward, the pack laughed, because failure was expected. Greatness was not. The Shadow Crest pack had stood for 7 generations, their territory sprawling across the northern ridges like a kingdom carved from stone and moonlight. They were proud, ancient, unshakable, or so they had believed. But for 3 years now, they had been without a Luna. The Alpha's trial, a sacred test passed down through centuries, had broken every candidate who dared attempt it. 5 noble she-wolves from the most prestigious bloodlines had entered those hallowed grounds with confidence blazing in their eyes. None had emerged the same. Lady Seraphina of the Highborn line lasted 2 days before the mental trials shattered her sanity. She now lived in seclusion, speaking only in whispers, her eyes haunted by visions she refused to name. Celestia Windspell, daughter of the Eastern Pack's Alpha, had conquered the physical challenges but collapsed during the spiritual trials, her wolf severed so traumatically from her consciousness that she could no longer shift without screaming. The others were worse. The pack didn't speak their names anymore. It felt disrespectful to the broken shells they'd become. And so the Shadow Crest pack existed in a strange limbo, powerful but incomplete, feared by enemies but pitied by allies. An Alpha without a Luna was like a sword without a hilt, dangerous, yes, but ultimately unwieldy, unstable. Alpha Theron felt that instability in his bones every single day. He stood now in the Hall of Ancestors, staring up at the carved faces of every Alpha who had come before him. Strong jaws, fierce eyes, and beside each one the elegant features of their Lunas, partners who had completed them, balanced them, made them legendary. His space on the wall remained empty, waiting, mocking. "You cannot postpone the decision any longer," Elder Cassius spoke from behind him, his voice weighted with decades of authority. "The pack grows restless. Neighboring territories sense our weakness. We need a Luna, Theron. The laws demand it." Theron didn't turn around. "The laws also demand the Luna survive the trials, unless you're suggesting we lower the standards our ancestors set." "I'm suggesting," Elder Cassius said carefully, "that perhaps the trials themselves are flawed, that maybe it's time to—" "No!" Theron's voice cut through the hall like a blade. "The Alpha's trial has stood for 300 years. It exists for a reason, to ensure that only the strongest, wisest, most connected to the Moon Goddess can stand beside the Alpha. To change it would be to admit our entire foundation is built on lies. And to watch every candidate break upon it is better?" Elder Mira entered the hall, her face lined with concern. "Theron, we've lost 5 noble daughters to those trials, 5 families devastated, 5 futures destroyed. How many more must suffer before we admit something is wrong?" Theron finally turned to face them, and they saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The burden of an Alpha who had watched woman after woman enter the sacred grounds with hope, only to emerge as shattered remnants. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly. "The Moon Goddess herself designed these trials. They test not just strength, but character, wisdom, spiritual depth, the ability to lead, to heal, to unite. A Luna must be all these things and more. If the candidates are failing, He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. If the candidates are failing, perhaps no Luna exists who can succeed.
There's one more option, Elder Mira said slowly. One we haven't tried. Theron raised an eyebrow. If you're about to suggest importing some princess from the southern packs— No, Elder Mira interrupted. I'm suggesting we open the trials. Make them available to any unmated she-wolf in the pack, regardless of rank or bloodline. The silence that followed was deafening. Elder Cassius recovered first. You cannot be serious. The Luna is the second highest position in the pack. To open it to commoners? To lower-ranked wolves? The dishonor alone. The dishonor is watching our pack crumble while we cling to outdated notions of nobility, Elder Mira countered sharply. What does bloodline matter if every highborn candidate breaks? Perhaps we've been looking in the wrong places all along. Theron considered this. On one hand, the suggestion was radical, borderline blasphemous. The Luna had always come from noble families, carefully selected, extensively trained. On the other hand, what did they have to lose? The pack was already destabilized, already whispered about, already pitied. Open the trials, he said finally. Let any unmated she-wolf who wishes to attempt them come forward. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps the moon goddess has been waiting for us to look beyond our prejudices. Elder Cassius looked horrified. This is madness. This is desperation, Theron corrected, and desperate times require desperate measures. The announcement was made the next day at the pack gathering. The reaction was mixed. The noble families were outraged, seeing it as a dilution of their status. The common pack members were skeptical, knowing that rank existed for a reason and doubting anyone without proper training could succeed where ladies had failed. But among all the voices, angry, doubtful, curious, there was one that remained silent. An Omega standing at the very back of the gathering, half hidden in shadows, her heart beginning to beat with a rhythm that felt like destiny awakening. Her name was Arya, though most in the pack simply called her the Omega when they acknowledged her existence at all. She had been born to the pack's lowest-ranked wolves, a maintenance worker and a kitchen servant who had died in a rogue attack when Arya was 12. With no family to advocate for her, no skills that the pack valued, and a wolf so small and quiet that she barely registered as a threat, Arya had been shuffled to the edges of pack life. She worked in the pack house kitchens, waking before dawn to prepare meals for wolves who never looked her in the eye. She cleaned the training grounds, gathering the discarded weapons and bloodied practice dummies while warriors joked and laughed around her as if she were invisible. And at night, when her body ached and her hands were raw from work, she would sneak away to the sacred grove at the edge of pack lands and stare up at the moon. "Why did you make me this?" she would whisper to the silent goddess above. "Why give me a wolf if I'm meant to be nothing?" Her wolf never answered, but it never stopped hoping either. When the Alpha announced the open trials, Arya felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't logical, it wasn't even sensible. She had no training, no education beyond basic pack knowledge, no supporters who would believe in her. But she had survived 12 years at the bottom of pack hierarchy. She had endured grief, loneliness, and daily indignities that would have broken softer spirits. And deep in her soul, in a place beyond reason or doubt, she felt the moon's call. "You were made for this," something whispered. "This is why you survived." For 3 days, Arya fought with herself. The practical part of her brain listed all the reasons attempting the trials was foolish. She would be humiliated, the pack would mock her, she would fail spectacularly and lose even the small, invisible life she'd carved out for herself. But the whisper wouldn't stop. What if you don't fail? What if this is exactly what you were meant for? On the 4th day, she made her decision.
The registration hall was filled with she-wolves when Arya arrived. Daughters of betas and gammas, warriors with impressive fighting records, healers known throughout the territory. They stood in clusters, discussing strategy, comparing credentials, radiating confidence. Arya stood alone, clutching the registration form with trembling hands. "Next," the registration official called, barely looking up. Arya stepped forward. The official glanced at her, then did a double take. You're registering for the Luna trials?" The question was loud enough that nearby conversations stopped. Heads turned, eyes found her. "Yes," Arya said, her voice quieter than she'd intended. "Do you understand what these trials entail?" the official asked, not unkindly. "They've broken high-born ladies, trained warriors, healers known throughout the territory." "I understand," Arya replied. A laugh came from behind her. Arya turned to see Valdis, a beta's daughter known for her combat skills and sharp tongue. "This is absurd. An Omega in the Alpha's trial? You can barely lift a training sword, let alone survive 3 days of sacred tests." Other candidates murmured agreement. A few looked at Arya with pity. Most looked at her with derision. "I have as much right as anyone else," Arya said, forcing herself to meet Valdis's mocking gaze. "The Alpha opened the trials to all unmated she-wolves. I qualify." "Technically, yes," another candidate, Lorelei, a healer from a respected family, said gently. "But dear, do you really want to humiliate yourself? These trials are dangerous. The last candidate barely survived, and she was trained by the best warriors in 3 territories." "I'm not afraid," Arya lied. "Then you're a fool," Valdis scoffed. "But fine, register. When you collapse on day 1, at least the rest of us will have one less competitor." The registration official hesitated, then slid the form toward Arya. "If you're certain." Arya signed her name with hands that shook only slightly. When she looked up, she found the official watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "May the moon goddess watch over you," he said quietly. "You're going to need it." The news of the Omega's registration spread through the pack like wildfire. The reactions ranged from amusement to outrage to genuine concern. In the pack house, older wolves shook their heads at the foolishness of youth. In the training yards, warriors took bets on how quickly she'd withdraw. And in the Alpha's office, Theron read the final list of candidates with a growing sense of inevitability. 12 she-wolves had registered. 11 had impressive credentials, powerful families, extensive training, and 1 was an Omega kitchen worker with no qualifications whatsoever. "You could disqualify her," Elder Cassius suggested, reading over his shoulder. "On the grounds of insufficient preparation, perhaps." "On what authority?" Theron countered. "I opened the trials to everyone. To turn her away now would make me a liar and the trials a farce." "She's going to get hurt, or worse. Theron, those trials are designed for wolves with extensive training, and Omega is still a wolf," Theron interrupted, "with a connection to the moon goddess same as anyone. If the goddess objects to her participation, she'll make that clear during the trials." He stood, rolling up the registration scroll. "The trials begin at dawn in 3 days. All candidates will be given equal opportunity. What happens after that is between them and fate." After the elders left, Theron found himself curious despite his better judgment. An Omega attempting the Alpha trial. It was unprecedented, possibly foolish, but also brave in its own reckless way. Let's see what you're made of, little Omega. Let's see if desperation has made you mad or if the moon goddess is finally answering prayers. Dawn broke cold and gray over the sacred grounds, a section of territory so old that the trees themselves seemed to remember the first wolves. The Alpha's trial would take place here, across 3 days and 3 tests. The trial of strength, testing physical prowess and combat ability.
The trial of wisdom, testing mental fortitude and decision-making. The trial of spirit, testing the connection to the moon goddess and the pack's soul. 12 candidates stood at the entrance, each dressed in simple training clothes, stripped of jewelry and rank markers. Before the trials, they were all equal, in theory. Arya stood at the end of the line, acutely aware of the superior conditioning of the wolves around her. Valdis's muscles rippled beneath her skin. Lorelei carried herself with the grace of extensive training. Even the smallest of the other candidates looked more capable than Arya felt. Alpha Theron emerged from the sacred lodge, flanked by the elders and the pack's most respected warriors. His presence was commanding. He didn't need to raise his voice to demand attention. Simply existing was enough. His eyes swept across the candidates, pausing briefly on Arya. She couldn't read his expression. Skepticism? Curiosity? Pity? "Welcome to the Alpha's trial," Theron's voice carried across the grounds with ceremonial weight. For 300 years, these tests have determined who is worthy to stand beside the Alpha as Luna. They are not designed to be easy. They are not meant to be fair. They are meant to reveal truth, the truth of your strength, your character, and your destiny. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Some of you will not finish. This is not failure. It is wisdom, knowing your limits. Some of you will finish but not succeed. This is not shame. It is honor, trying despite the odds. And one of you may prove that you are exactly what this pack has been waiting for. His gaze found Arya again, just for a moment. The trial of strength begins now. The first challenge was deceptively simple: cross the Gorge of Trials. The gorge was a jagged scar in the earth, 50 feet deep and 30 feet across. On the far side stood the marker they needed to reach. Between here and there, nothing but air, ancient rope bridges that looked ready to snap, and jagged rocks below that had claimed careless wolves throughout history. But the crossing itself wasn't the real test. As the candidates approached, warriors emerged from the tree line, armed with blunted training weapons and malicious grins. "Your task," Elder Cassius announced, "is to cross the gorge while defending yourselves from attack. You may use any means necessary. The only rule, you must reach the far side with this token intact." Each candidate was given a small carved stone bearing the pack symbol. "Begin." Chaos erupted immediately. Valdis charged forward with a battle cry, her combat training evident in every movement. She deflected the first attacker with brutal efficiency, using his momentum against him, sending him sprawling. 2 more warriors engaged her, and she held her ground, fighting with the skill of someone who'd trained for exactly this scenario. Lorelei took a different approach. Using her healer's knowledge of pressure points and anatomy, she moved with precision rather than power, disabling attackers with strategic strikes before sprinting for the nearest bridge. The other candidates employed various strategies, some more successful than others. Within minutes, the first candidate was disarmed, her token claimed by a grinning warrior. She withdrew with tears streaming down her face. Then a second, then a third. And through it all, Arya hung back, watching, learning. She saw how the warriors moved, how they anticipated attacks, where they left themselves vulnerable. She noticed that they tended to focus on the most threatening candidates first, dismissing smaller or weaker-looking wolves as lesser priorities. "What are you waiting for, Omega?" Valdis shouted as she reached one of the bridges. "Too scared to even try?" The taunt stung, but it also created an opportunity. While all eyes were on Valdis's crossing, she was battling 2 warriors on the swaying bridge itself in a display that was genuinely impressive. Arya moved. She didn't charge,
didn't draw attention. She simply slipped along the edge of the gorge, staying low, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent years being invisible. A warrior noticed her, moved to intercept. But Arya had spent 12 years reading body language, anticipating the moods and movements of wolves who outranked her. She saw his approach, adjusted her path, ducked under his reaching arm with the flexibility of someone small enough to slip through spaces others couldn't. His hand grazed her shoulder, but her token remained safe. She reached a secondary bridge, one of the older, more deteriorated options that the other candidates had avoided. It swayed dangerously, several planks missing, rope frayed in concerning places. But it was also unguarded, considered too risky to be a viable option. Arya tested the first plank. It held. She took a breath and stepped onto the bridge. The gorge yawned beneath her, 50 feet of fatal emptiness. The bridge swayed with each step, creaking ominously. Halfway across, a plank cracked under her weight, and her foot plunged through. She gasped, catching herself on the rope railings, her token slipping from her grasp. Time seemed to slow as the carved stone tumbled toward the rocks below. Arya's wolf surged forward, not to shift, but to enhance. Her reflexes sharpened. Her hand shot out with speed she didn't know she possessed, catching the token inches before it fell beyond reach. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pulled herself up, redistributing her weight, continuing across the bridge with trembling legs and white-knuckled grip on both rope and token. When her feet touched solid ground on the far side, she almost collapsed with relief. Arya, Omega of No House, has completed the first challenge, Elder Mira announced, surprise clear in her voice. On the other side of the gorge, several candidates were still fighting. Valdis had made it across but looked bruised and winded. Lorelei was pinned down by 3 warriors, struggling valiantly but clearly losing. By the time the first day ended, only 7 candidates remained. Arya was one of them. That night, the surviving candidates were housed in the sacred lodge, each given a small room for rest. Arya's was the smallest, simplest, fitting for her rank. She didn't care. She'd succeeded where 5 candidates had failed. Against all odds, against everyone's expectations, she'd survived day 1. But as she lay on the simple cot, exhaustion pulling at her consciousness, doubt crept in. The trial of strength had been exactly that, physical. She'd succeeded through cleverness and agility, but tomorrow would test her mind, and the day after that would test her spirit, the connection to the moon goddess that she'd never been trained to develop, that no one had ever encouraged her to explore. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the darkness. "I barely made it through 1 challenge. There are 2 more impossible tests." "You're doing what you were always meant to do," her wolf whispered back, stronger than usual. "Trust the moon. Trust yourself." Easier said than done when she could hear Valdis and the other candidates in nearby rooms discussing strategy, comparing notes, drawing on years of education and training that Arya simply didn't have. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless, filled with dreams of bridges collapsing and tokens falling, and a massive moon hanging overhead, watching with ancient, knowing eyes. Day 2 began not with physical challenges, but with a test that made several candidates visibly nervous. The trial of wisdom took place in the Grove of Echoes, where 7 ancient trees formed a perfect circle. In the center stood a stone table covered with a white cloth. Alpha Theron addressed the remaining 7 candidates with grave seriousness.
Aluna must make decisions that affect not just herself, but the entire pack. She must balance mercy with justice, tradition with progress, emotion with logic. Today you will face scenarios that have no perfect answer, only the answer you believe is right.
You will be judged not on the outcome, but on your reasoning, your values, and your ability to lead when the path is unclear. He gestured to the stone table. You will face 3 scenarios. Each will be presented to you privately. Your responses will be recorded and evaluated. There is no time limit, no consultation, only you, your conscience, and your choice. Elder Mira pulled back the white cloth, revealing 7 sealed scrolls. Each candidate would draw one, face their 3 scenarios in isolation, and live with the consequences of their decisions. Valdis went first, emerging an hour later with a troubled expression. Lorelei followed, taking even longer, her face pale when she finally exited the grove. One by one, the candidates faced their trials of wisdom. When Aria's turn came, her hands trembled as she opened her scroll. The first scenario materialized before her eyes, not as words, but as a vision, vivid and real. You are Luna. During a harsh winter, food stores are running low. A family of rogues, a mother and 3 pups, are caught stealing from pack supplies. Pack law demands exile for theft, which would mean certain death in the frozen wilderness. But showing mercy might encourage others to steal, threatening the pack's survival. What do you do? Aria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of imaginary lives in her hands. She thought of her own childhood, how hunger had been a constant companion after her parents died, how pack law had provided for her, yes, but barely, how no one had shown mercy or kindness beyond the bare minimum required. But she also understood survival, understood that Aluna's first duty was to the pack's welfare. She spoke into the sacred silence, knowing her words were being recorded somehow. I would offer the mother a choice: perform service to the pack, hard labor, kitchen work, whatever is needed to earn the food she stole, plus additional rations for her family. The theft would be punished through work, not exile. She keeps her pups alive, and the pack gains additional labor during a difficult time. The law is upheld, theft is punished, but mercy creates opportunity rather than death. The vision faded, replaced by the second scenario. You discover that your closest friend has been secretly meeting with wolves from a rival pack, sharing information about Shadowcrest's defenses and patrol patterns. When confronted, she reveals that she's found her true mate in the rival pack and has been trying to find a way to leave without causing war. She begs for her help and silence. What do you do? This one was harder. Aria had never had a close friend, but she understood loneliness, understood desperate love, and she also understood betrayal. I would tell her she has one chance, Aria said slowly, working through the ethics. She must confess to the Alpha herself, explain about her mate, ask formally to transfer to the rival pack through proper channels. If she does this with honesty, I'll advocate for mercy, for the transfer to be allowed peacefully. But if she refuses to confess, if she chooses to continue the betrayal, then I report it myself, because Aluna's loyalty must be to the pack first, even when it breaks her heart. 2 down, 1 to go. The final scenario appeared, and Aria's breath caught. War has come. The pack is losing. The enemy Alpha offers terms. Surrender your mate, the Alpha, to be executed as a war criminal, and the rest of the pack will be absorbed peacefully, allowed to live. Refuse, and he'll slaughter every wolf, pup and elder alike. You have minutes to decide. What do you do? Aria sat with this for a long time. This wasn't about law or justice or clever solutions. This was about what she valued most when everything was at stake. She thought of Alpha Theron, a wolf she barely knew, who'd probably never noticed her existence before she registered for these trials. But she also understood what an Alpha meant, what a Luna meant. I would refuse the terms, Aria said steadily, despite the horror of what she was contemplating. Because to give up your mate, your Alpha, to save your own life, is to become something worse than dead. It's to become a pack of cowards who will spend every day living with the knowledge that we bought our survival with the blood of the one who was supposed to be able to trust us most.
The world suddenly shifted, and she was 12 years old again, standing in the pack house on the day they told her parents were dead. She felt the exact texture of that moment, the way the floor seemed to tilt, the way sound became muffled, the way the elder's lips moved, but she couldn't process the words. "No," she whispered, even though she knew this was memory, not reality. "Please, no." But the vision continued, forcing her to relive the funeral, the pitying looks, the discussions about what to do with the orphan, the slow realization that she had become invisible, inconvenient, forgotten. The pain was as fresh as the day it happened. Arya sank to her knees, sobbing. This was why candidates broke, because facing your deepest pain without any armor or distraction was unbearable. "Run!" part of her screamed. "Go back down! Save yourself!" But another part, the part that had survived 12 years of loneliness, that had dared to register for these trials despite knowing she'd be mocked, that had made it this far against impossible odds, that part whispered something different. "You survived this once, you can survive it again, and this time you're stronger." Arya forced herself to breathe, to acknowledge the pain, to let it wash through her rather than trying to resist it. "I was alone," she said aloud, speaking to the memory, to the mountain, to herself. "I was lost and scared and so desperately lonely, but I survived. I'm still here, and that child deserved better, but she was strong enough to endure. I was strong enough." The vision shifted, showing her all the years that followed, every dismissal, every insult, every moment of being treated as less than. And then it showed her something else, the quiet moments of resilience, the times she'd helped other low-ranked wolves without expecting thanks, the nights she'd practiced combat alone in the woods, even though no one would train her, the way she'd never let them make her cruel, even when kindness seemed foolish. "I am more than their expectations," Arya said, standing despite shaking legs. "I am more than the rank they gave me, and I am exactly what I need to be." The vision released her. Arya continued climbing, tears drying on her cheeks, something fundamental shifting in her chest. Higher on the mountain, Lorelei faced her own trial. Visions of every patient she'd failed to save, every healing that had come too late, every life lost despite her best efforts. The healer's anguished cries echoed across the peak. 3 remained. Arya climbed through her own gauntlet of visions, moments of failure, fear, inadequacy. Each one hurt, each one demanded to be acknowledged, processed, integrated. But she didn't break, she climbed higher. The mountain showed her the moment Draven rejected Leora, except in the vision, Arya was Leora, feeling the bond sever, experiencing that soul-deep agony. "This could be you," the mountain seemed to whisper. "Even if you succeed, even if you become Luna, you could still lose everything. You could still be broken. Is it worth the risk?" "Yes," Arya answered without hesitation, "because trying and failing is better than never trying at all, because these trials aren't just about becoming Luna, they're about becoming who I was always meant to be." The vision faded, replaced by something that made her heart stop. She saw herself as Luna, powerful, beloved, standing beside Alpha Theron as his equal and partner. But in the vision's eyes, she also saw the weight, the responsibility, the impossible decisions, the loneliness of leadership, the constant pressure to be perfect, to never falter, to carry the pack's welfare on her shoulders every single day.
"This is what you're asking for," the mountain showed her. "Not a fairy tale, not a happy ending, but a burden that will test you every day for the rest of your life. Are you truly prepared for this? Arya looked at the vision, at the future she might claim. She saw not just the burden, but the purpose. Not just the loneliness, but the pack she'd protect. Not just the weight, but the worth. "I'm not prepared," she admitted honestly. "I'll probably make mistakes. I'll definitely struggle. But I'm willing to learn, willing to grow, willing to carry this weight because someone has to. And the moon goddess has brought me this far. I trust her guidance. I trust my strength. And I trust that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." The vision stopped. Ahead, bathed in moonlight despite the morning hour, the moonstone waited. Arya reached the summit to find she was alone. The other two candidates had fallen somewhere below, their spiritual trials proving too much. She had made it. Against all odds, against every expectation, the Omega nobody wanted had conquered the Alpha's trial. The moonstone rose from the mountain's peak like a crystallized piece of moonlight itself, taller than a wolf, pulsing with inner luminescence, humming with power that made the air vibrate. Arya approached slowly, reverently. When she placed her hand on the stone, the world exploded into silver light. She stood in a space between spaces, not the mountain, not the mortal world, but somewhere beyond. And before her stood a figure of impossible beauty and power, the moon goddess herself. "Arya," the goddess spoke, her voice like music and thunder combined. "Do you know why you succeeded where others failed?" "No, goddess," whispered Arya, dropping to her knees. "Because you came seeking purpose, not status. You didn't try to prove you were worthy, you simply tried to become worthy. The others wanted to be Luna. You wanted to be better than you were. That is the difference." The goddess reached out, touching Arya's forehead. Power flooded through her, ancient, overwhelming, transformative. "I bless you, Arya of Shadowcrest. I name you worthy. I mark you as Luna. But know this, the trials do not end here. Every day will test you. Every decision will challenge you. This is not a reward, it is a calling. Do you accept?" "I accept," Arya said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The light grew brighter, brighter, until... Arya returned to consciousness at the base of Sacred Peak, surrounded by the entire pack. Elder Mira knelt beside her, tears streaming down the old wolf's face. "She bears the mark," Mira whispered in awe. "The moon goddess has chosen." Arya sat up slowly. Her body felt different, stronger, more aligned, as if pieces of herself that had always been slightly out of place had finally clicked into position. On her shoulder, visible to everyone, glowed the silver mark of the moon goddess, a crescent moon surrounded by stars, proof of divine blessing that couldn't be faked or denied. The pack stared in absolute shock. Alpha Theron stood at the front of the crowd, his expression cycling through disbelief, wonder, and something that looked almost like relief. He approached slowly, then dropped to one knee before her. "Luna," he said, his voice carrying across the silent assembly. "The moon goddess has spoken. Will you accept the position? Will you stand beside me and lead this pack?" Arya looked at him, this powerful alpha who was kneeling before an omega. She looked at the pack who had dismissed her, ignored her, treated her as invisible for 12 years. And she smiled. "I will," she said clearly. "But not as the Luna you expected. Not as someone who will simply defer to tradition or rank. I'll lead as the moon goddess showed me, with wisdom earned through pain, strength forged through survival, and compassion learned through loneliness." She stood, helping Theron to his feet, meeting his eyes as an equal. "I'll challenge you when you're wrong. I'll support you when you're right. I'll protect this pack with everything I am. but I'll also change it, because the system that kept an Omega invisible while highborn ladies broke is a system that needs to evolve." Theron searched her face, then slowly smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his alpha composure. "I wouldn't expect anything less," he said. "That's exactly why the moon goddess chose you." He turned to the pack, raising his voice. "Shadowcrest, your Luna has been chosen, not by bloodline or politics or tradition, but by the divine will of the moon goddess herself. All hail Luna Aria!" There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Elder Mira stood, raising her fist. "All hail Luna Aria!" One by one, the pack joined, even those who had mocked her, even those who had doubted, because the moon goddess's mark didn't lie, and her blessing couldn't be denied. "All hail Luna Aria!" The roar of acceptance shook the trees. Aria stood tall, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed, no longer just an Omega. She had walked through trials that broke nobles and warriors. She had faced her deepest pains and darkest fears. She had proven that worth wasn't determined by rank or bloodline, but by character and courage. The pack had expected her to fail. They had laughed when she stepped forward, but failure was expected. Greatness was not. And Aria, the Omega nobody wanted, had just rewritten the destiny of the entire Shadowcrest pack. Sometimes, the moon goddess chooses the broken ones not because they're perfect, but because they understand what it means to rise. Sometimes the greatest leaders aren't born into power, they're forged in pain and tested in trials that would destroy lesser souls. And sometimes, the wolf everyone overlooks is exactly the one destiny has been waiting for all along.